Welcome to part 3 of this electric guitar build. The first episode, we took care of most of the work on the body. The second episode, we built the neck. Now, it's time to get on to the finish. That's the goal in this video. Hope you stick around for it. I'm Jeff, and you're watching Home Built Workshop. What's going on, my friends? I hope your day is going great. Welcome back to the workshop, where we are now working on what is part 3 of this electric guitar build. Off camera, I've been doing a ton of sanding, getting the body and the neck sanded. Right now, it is up to 400 grit, and I think we can stop there for a few minutes at least, and work on a little bit of final fitting of a couple of components, and then we can get into applying the finish to this build. I can't wait to see what this wood's gonna look like once we get some finish applied, but first, I need to drill the holes for the grommets, which will be used to attach the neck. Now, I didn't drill these holes before because I wanted to do some grain filling on the mahogany, and past experience has told me that if you have those holes there and you're not extremely careful with the grain filler, you're gonna get grain filler in those holes and it can be a little tricky to get out. So I decided this time around to just not worry about drilling those holes. I've got the grain filled, and now is a good time to drill those holes. To mark out where I need to drill the holes, I basically have the neck pocket portion of a neck, and I've very carefully laid that out on this little template, and all I need to do is to install that into the neck pocket. And I've made this little transfer punch from an old Allen wrench, and I can just use that to mark the holes. Now, using the drill press to keep everything nice and straight, I'll drill a couple of pilot holes down through the neck pocket. Then I'll flip the body over, and I'll use those pilot holes as locating holes for my 15mm Forstner bit. I'm just drilling some shallow recesses, which the grommets will fit into. I like to use these grommets as opposed to a neck plate because I just feel that it's a cleaner look. And now, with the neck awkwardly clamped into the neck pocket, I like the positioning of it. Now I can use the neck screws and lightly screw them into place, which will put some little indentations in the back of the neck, and that's where I'll eventually drill the pilot holes once we get to the final assembly. The reason I'm doing this now is because I am using the clamps, and if I somehow put any little indentations in the wood, I still have the opportunity to sand that out. If I did this after the finish was applied, and then put an indentation in the wood, well, that'd be kind of tricky to get out. We'd end up having to refinish whatever portion got damaged by the clamp. So I'm just getting the holes marked now before we apply the finish. And I'm glad I did this now because I realized I forgot to order black neck screws. I've got all the other hardware, but I didn't get black screws. So I'm gonna have to get those ordered. And at least we have time to get that done. And there's our indentations where we'll drill some pilot holes. I was gonna drill these holes a little bit later, but I decided I may as well go ahead and drill these now. That way it's out of the way. Now I wanna take some time and get these parts really clean. I'll start by using some compressed air to blow off the majority of the dust, and then I'll wipe it down with a clean rag just to make sure that it's as clean as I can get it. With all the holes drilled, pockets cut, parts fit, sanding done, dust cleaned off, I think now it's finally time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Well, at least I've been waiting for. We're ready to start applying finish to these parts. So what are we using for finish? From the beginning of this project, I knew that I wanted a natural finish to the wood with black hardware. I think it's gonna look awesome, and Tru Oil is gonna give me the look that I'm hoping for. I'm not doing any sort of fancy French polishing type of finish on this. The look that I'm shooting for on this build is kind of a matte to satin finish, so I don't wanna build up enough layers that I end up with a high gloss, and Tru Oil is the type of finish that the more coats you build up, the glossier it gets. I'm hoping for 3 to 4 coats. We'll see where it looks when we get there. And then if we have to add a few more coats, it's easy enough to do. I'm gonna use just a good quality paper towel. I've tested this and I don't get any lint from it, so it should work good. Oh yeah, that's gonna be cool. Really see that figure in there now. This is what I'm waiting for. Oh, look at that. And that is exactly the look I was hoping for. Oh, that's going to be cool. I'm already liking the color that the mahogany's taken on, and I can't wait to see this with a couple more coats. I'm planning to do about 4 coats, and then we'll see what it looks like from there. If I need to add more, I will. And I'm going to do most of those off camera, mainly because it's just going to be exactly the same process. I'm going to let this one sit about 4 hours, lightly sand it with some 4/0 steel wool, possibly a soft Scotch-Brite pad, and then apply another coat. So probably 2 to 3 coats I'll get in a day, and then finish up the following coats the next day. We'll take a look at it when we have 4 coats and see if it has the right amount of shine that I'm looking for, which isn't a whole lot. Once the 3rd coat of Tru Oil had dried, and before I applied what I'm hoping is the final coat, I decided to do a little bit of experimenting to figure out the best method to get the level of sheen that I'm looking for. Since I know I'm going to have to sand this to remove some of the gloss, I started out using a synthetic pad that's supposed to replicate a fine steel wool. Then I went back over one side of the top using some actual 4/0 steel wool. I wanted to compare the differences and see if one looked better than the other. Now I'm doing a little steel wool versus synthetic pad comparison. Just sanding one side with the steel wool, comparing it with a light raking across there, just trying to see the difference in the gloss. Steel wool looks a little bit clearer, but the sheen that I'm seeing, and I have no idea how I'm going to show you this on the camera, the sheen that I'm seeing is about the same, but I think it's a little clearer with the steel wool. I don't know how well you can tell on the camera. This side is sanded with the synthetic pad. This portion right here is with the steel wool. Trying to see if I can make it get a reflection in the camera, but I don't see a whole lot of difference. Just maybe a slight bit. After completing my unscientific test, I went ahead and finished the sanding on all the parts with the synthetic steel wool pad before applying what is hopefully the last coat of Tru Oil. This will be coat number 4. If 4 coats of Tru Oil doesn't seem like all that many to you, remember that my goal here is not to have a high gloss finish. If I was going to build this up into a super high gloss where I plan to polish it out and make it all shiny, I probably would apply at least twice that amount of coats and probably be somewhere in that 8 to 10 range, maybe even more. But since I don't need to build up that many coats to get the sheen that I'm looking for, I think 4, possibly 5 is going to be plenty. Man, that flame maple's so cool looking. But that's the last coat. Hopefully. We'll just let this dry for a good 4 hours or so. Maybe I'll even let it sit overnight, and this finish will be done. Super easy using Tru Oil. After letting these parts sit for a few days, right now it actually looks really nice. It's got a nice gloss on there, and if I was going for a high gloss finish, I feel pretty good that I could polish this out and it would look really nice. But remember, a gloss is not what I'm shooting for. Now we need to get rid of the gloss and see if we can achieve more of a matte to a satin type of finish. Now in the past I've tried this with different products and I haven't had great success. I found that oftentimes it's better to just use a matte clear of whatever product you're using to get that matte finish. But I've seen people get some great results using Tru Oil, making it matte by basically just scuffing the gloss off there. So that's what we're going to do. Based on my earlier tests, I decided to stick with the steel wool to buff out the finish on the neck as well as the body. Not sure if you can tell on the camera, there's a reflection off of this portion of the neck, but up here, it's actually pretty decent. One thing to keep in mind during this process is that while we're using an abrasive to create the sheen that we're looking for, what we're actually doing is creating micro scratches in the finish. Now normally you want your finish to be perfectly flat and smooth, and really that's how you get the gloss. But by creating these micro scratches using whatever abrasive we're using, we want to make sure we're always going with the grain so that those micro scratches aren't visible. As I'm doing this, I'm using really light pressure. I'm not trying to really press down there. I'm just letting the abrasive do its job, not trying to force it. There's the back with one half of it buffed back to I guess I'd call that a matte finish. Here's the other side, not buffed. It's quite a difference. I like that. I was kind of skeptical that this would work. I've tried using stuff like this in the past with different finishes, and it just never seemed to give me the look that I was hoping for. But as of right now, this looks like it's gonna work really well. I'm quite impressed, really. This is cool. And with that, this finish is done. That was awesome. I didn't even need all of these Scotch-Brite pads. I just wasn't sure going into it, but the steel wool worked awesome, even though it does make a mess. And I wouldn't recommend doing this if the guitar was even remotely assembled. But since it's all in pieces, the steel wool is easy to clean up. I don't have to worry about anything getting into the pickups. And I can start assembling this. I'm going to do the assembly and the setup for this guitar off camera because I've covered that before in some of my other builds. If you really want to see that process in a little bit more detail, I'll put some links in the video description. You can go check those out. The process that I use on my other builds is going to be almost exactly the same as on this build. So I'll be right back and I'll show you this finished guitar. I can't wait. I'm so excited. And after assembly and setup, here's the finished guitar. This thing is done just in time to make it to the upcoming guitar show. Man, this thing turned out great. And through my limited ability to play this, because it's a righty, it sounds really good too. I can't wait to hear how it actually sounds from somebody who can actually play this. A quick rundown on some of the specs. We've got a 25.5-inch scale length. We've got Schaller bridge, Seymour Duncan distortion pickups, CTS, pots, and switch. We've got Godot tuners. We've got Schaller strap locks, mahogany body with a quilted maple control plate and a quilted maple top. We've got an awesome flamed maple neck, Pau Ferro fretboard with spalted maple fretboard markers. Oh, and let's not forget a reverse headstock as well. I hope you enjoyed following along with this build because I know I for sure enjoyed putting it together, and it's super awesome to see it completed. Thanks a lot for following along. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this build and what you want to see next time. Maybe for some upcoming builds. I've got some ideas, some things that I'm working on, but I'd love to hear from you too. What would you like to see, or what would you be interested in? Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.